have in our presence a very esteemed Mr. Abri Hoffman. As an IT project turnaround specialist, Mr. Hoffman has focused the majority of his career stabilizing and rescuing troubled IT projects at companies such as SARS, Cecil, and British American Tobacco. As an avid academic, Mr. Hoffman lectured part-time at UWC, Stellenbosch Business School, and CPUT in various capacities on postgraduate level since 2006. One of his latest accomplishments at CPUT is where he initiated and led a first in collaboration between multiple South African universities to build and implement a standardized online application system. To fulfill his passion for education, he is involved in a number of community technology teacher training programs, where his focus is on the infusion of technology into education. His current research focus on utilizing technology to enable learners specific learning styles through various presentation methods, tools, and techniques. With that short introduction, I'd like to now hand over to Mr. Abri Hoffman, who joins us all the way from the Republic of Cape Town on this chilly, I'm sure it's also quite wet in Cape Town. Abri, welcome to the conference, and we really look forward to hearing your address. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you. Thanks for the kind words there. So yes, it's a very cold, wet day in Cape Town. We were first in terms of this cold front. So wherever you're in the country, we're sending it on to you. But the sun has just started shining, so things looks up, and I hope we're through the worst of this cold for this afternoon, and at least for the weekend. But thanks a lot. It's a privilege to be able to join here. I just want to convey my apologies on behalf of Prof. Maki Johnson, who was supposed to present here. Unfortunately, there were some uncircumstantial conditions and circumstances that she can't be here. But happily, I'm here and really looking forward to engaging with you. So to start off, let me just quickly share my my screen, and then we can kick off. Chair, can you just confirm that you're able to see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. So yeah, just a little bit more about me. Spent a lot of time in education, really love it, and perhaps addressing this community to say that my real the person in life that brought me to where I am and who I'm always aspiring to is a grade 12 teacher, English teacher, that taught me what it means to be a teacher, how to adapt, how to know what your learners is thinking, how best they learn, how best they perform. And it really set me on a path and a love for education. So thanks for this opportunity. So if we just go into it and just start thinking for a moment, we are in a very difficult, a very special time where the pandemic has forced us into a way where we have to think differently. So let's spend a few seconds or a minute and just reflecting and think about it and say, how do we use technology in our personal lives? And asking some questions. How do I relate to technology? And what is technology? If we start thinking about technology, we quite often think about a very difficult, challenging environment where I don't understand it. There's a number of reasons why I can't use it, etc., etc. But is that really true? So just ask some questions. Do I receive emails on my mobile phones? Do I use WhatsApp? Do I use Zoom or Teams? And if I do it in my personal life, can I do it with my learners? Can I do it with my students? And if the answer is no, I really want to challenge you and say, why not? What is different from chatting to a friend than chatting to a learner or a student? Then do I use any integrated calendars which will send me reminders on my phone? Do we see that? Do we use Gmail? If we do that in our personal lives, Why not professionally? If we use them in our professional lives, why not personally? And then, do I attend courses on technology use? There are so many valuable pieces of information available throughout the internet. If I go into YouTube, um, the level of education available there is phenomenal. Not to talk even of TEDx, etc., etc. There are so many platforms. Yes, there's a myriad of information available. However, if I start filtering through it and know what I'm looking for, there's really very important, valuable information available that we can use every day. So I want us to take this to heart and just think about it and say, why are we using these things? What are we using it for? And if not used to enable us to work with our students better, why not? We had to adapt. Uh, Come January 2020, we heard the first words or the first waves of COVID, but it was very far away. It was in China. Will this roll over? Where are we going? And then all of a sudden, on the 20th, 21st of March last year, we had a public address by our president saying we're going into a level 5 lockdown. Uh, I remember at the time sitting with some colleagues, and the first inclination about it in corporate was to say, let's just put people on leave for this 3 weeks. Let's just look at how we can get through this, because after 3 weeks, things will be better. Very soon after that, they realized and said, but we can't do this. This may be longer. How do we make sure that people can work from home? How do we can trust them to work from home? The same principle applied in schools. How do we manage? How do we go forward? We can't cancel this year. Very soon after that, we realized that. And what we've seen is how quickly teachers adapted in terms of using WhatsApp to share videos, TV as a means of learning, radio channels, a collaboration between teachers and teachers learning technology, start making use of what's there, what's available to us. And when I say this, the experience has shown us that it's teachers in the most basic areas with very limited resources that started using these items. So how do we adapt and why do we adapt? Even 20 years ago, Osdurk said that sustainable economic development requires substantial investment in human capital, not technology, human capital. Education enriches people's understanding of themselves and the world. It improves the quality of their lives and leads to broad social benefits to individuals and society. If I just read that statement, I think it was said 20 years ago. We had no idea what will happen. Where do we sit today? How frequently do we interact via technology? Making use of Zoom, for instance, right now. To think that we have a conference with hundreds of people around the country looking at Zoom, but yet interacting, still getting some energy from it, still having a sense of community. And then he says, education raises people's productivity and creativity and promotes entrepreneurship and technological advances. Now, what we've seen over the last period is how people start using this. I just had to have my vehicle license renewed, and sitting in meetings from dark to dark, I just don't have the opportunity to go to the traffic authorities. I saw on Facebook somebody advertised. I contacted them via WhatsApp. I sent through the documentation, and I just received a picture back of my license renewed, as well as a dress change that was done from Gauteng to Cape Town. All of this using technology. So we need to understand this relationship between education and development, where the funding of it will come from, where the will, the social and political will come from to make this happen. From educational context, we have a myriad of challenges. We're just looking at education is characterized by poor internet access in rural areas, lack of adequate learning resources, multilingual challenges, lack of teachers' digital skills. And numerous studies from UNESCO and other areas that tells us this. We're looking at mobile first, where mobile devices such as mobile phones offers various opportunities. And our saturation in terms of these devices is far, far higher than we realize. In studies that was done in 2015 and 2016, we already saw saturation levels of close to 100%, meaning there's a smartphone for every person in the country. It may be unequally distributed, but the opportunities are there. And then the question being asked, why do we not leverage technology? In South Africa, we still have expensive internet access, especially those areas that's not fortunate enough to have fiber and unlimited access. Uh, our data via our cell phone providers is still very expensive. So we have to work around it. We have lack of adequate resources. Some of our schools we see just don't have the resources necessary. Some other schools have brilliant resources. A lack of a language of proficiency. So where do we go with this? How do we do it? When I work in this manner, am I understood? And we always have the challenge of communication. I don't have the ability to immediately understand whether somebody grasps what I'm saying. So it becomes difficult. We need to learn those skills. We need to use our other senses, listening, checking in, doing surveys, making sure that we overcome that language proficiency barriers. And then lack of existence of training, especially in STEM. We're seeing this over and over, the lack of logical thinking. Uh, Looking at universities, looking at corporates, it is a big challenge that we are facing, and how do we address it? And how do we do this in different school contexts? We have brilliant schools, we see brilliant students, but I also had the fortune and the privilege to work at universities where we don't have these resources, and learners come out of school, start a university career, and had to learn, and what they have done to overcome those challenges. So it is doable. We just have to think around and say, how do we make it work? Moving into the fourth industrial revolution, obviously we're in a stage now where the amount of data, the amount of information becomes so big, so much, looking at big data, but just how everything fits together with mobile devices, IoT platforms, and cloud computing. We're looking at big data and smart sensors, 3D printing. There's just so much that's happening from all over. So how do we utilize this? How do we move this forward? How do we expose our learners early enough to these items and understand what can be done? So why do we need technology in education? Well, first off, we see that we've got, and we know that we've got a very high unemployment rate, 35% in 2020, out of work and out of school at 20% in 2018. However, a lot of these learners have got skills already. All skills can be developed. How do we get them to those areas where they can make use of the various opportunities that's available? We have to think about our global impact. South Africa is becoming a more and more sought after environment for technology development. And with the advent of the pandemic and where we are right now, it's well accepted to work remotely. We've learned that skill. We are still storming a little bit in terms of finding a balance between work and life, but it's there. We can use it. The growing need for STEM skills, and we really have to focus this and understand what those are. I can really say with complete confidence and pride that some of the best people that I've worked with had mathematics degrees. So how do we make sure that people understand the importance and what maths will do for you? How it fits into the rest of it. We're talking about science, technology, engineering, maths, all these kind of things. But it all fits together, and we need to understand and build the love for it and where we go with it. The South African conversations around the fourth industrial revolution. Where do we go with this? What do we do? How do we develop it? How do we make use of these opportunities that's available to us? We are a very inexpensive market compared to others. Looking at the exchange rates, we become a very favorable nation, and we're known for hard work. So how do we install that same discipline and the love for it in our students? From a skills gap, we have in South Africa big skills gaps. Software developers, systems engineers, programmers, security experts becoming more and more important. Database designers and communication engineers, just a few, just mentioning some of these. And so a lot of these quite often is developed at a very young age. So how do we expose our learners to these kind of things? How do we use our own skills and technology to make sure that we can install those? So how do we do this? There is a big buzzword in education at the moment called blended learning. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you too much about blended learning, but in my own life, I've found that it really works very, very well. So what is blended learning? It's defined as a teaching and learning approach that combines face-to-face classroom methods with online activities. And there's a number of variations in terms of this, whether it is online blended, whether it's classroom blended, and how much effort do I have to put in terms of my preparations, my engagement with the students, and then what type of student do I have? So it's widely used already. It offers opportunities to a variety of platforms. We have to, however, rethink our instructional design. The investment of additional time and effort in design. A lot of the work that we would have done in the classroom now needs to be done before the time. That investment is also in terms of research. There are so much available on the net, in our various platforms, throughout the community. Do the research, share, use what's already available. And in that way, we can spend more time understanding our learners and getting the right message across. It's also a matter of providing the content in such a way that each of the types of learners can understand and make the best of it. And a little bit later on, I will spend a little bit of time in terms of the different learning styles. And we need to trigger a shift towards more active learning-centered approach. In some of the engagements that we had with teachers, the discussions came up where we discussed how can I make students or learners go to YouTube and watch educational videos rather than the stuff they're doing currently. What does such educational video have to do to make sure that it entices people to look at it, view it, and learn from it? And I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gladwell. I'm sure you've read some of his books, Tipping Point, Outliers, etc., etc. And just his writing style is in such a way that I want to continue. I've learned so much from it. However, it's an entertaining read, and we need to keep those in mind when we go into blended learning, because we have to entice our learners to go there. So it gives us the possibility, apologies, to adapt the learning materials to students' individual needs or preferences. John and Waters already described in 2012, and blended learning might also be better able to meet the needs of current generation students who are surrounded by computers in their daily life. We must never forget the impact of our Generation Z. The need for instant gratification, the need to be satisfied and occupied constantly, sitting just behind a computer listening or to be there, to be present. So blended learning's approach have got a couple of things that we really have to focus on. First, understand yourself. Secondly, understand your context. Then we really have to understand your students and then understand the learning objectives. So allow me to go quickly through those. Understanding myself as a teacher, there's a number of items that I have to focus on. Firstly, there's the fear of the unknown. And in our engagement with teachers, we spend quite a bit of time on this. So when I talk about technology, where did technology start? When I look at educational technology, where did that start? Have you ever thought that a cave drawing was educational technology at its time? It was the first way in which we recorded what has happened, how it's happened. And as we progress and we look at the printing press, as we look at the clay slates and blackboards, overhead projectors, all of these at its time was technology that was and fearful. We have a lot more now, but if you understand that, we realize that it's not that fearful, that it's not that difficult to use. We already use technology in our private lives. How does it spill into work? As I said, WhatsApp, Zoom, YouTube, etc., etc. We can go through this a myriad of opportunities. However, we need dedicated time to really redefine how we conduct our lectures. I have to think differently. I don't have the opportunities to gauge and assess through visual means whether my learners understand. Are they on track? Are they concentrating on what I'm doing? We need to find different ways. We need to acknowledge the need for training in ourselves. And then we need to keep on networking. There are so many opportunities. There are so many new thoughts. What we've seen from the various teachers in very difficult circumstances and how they've excelled is incredible. So your own context, as I mentioned, are we using a learning management system at school or not? What skills and interests do you have which you can use in blended learning environment? So for instance, do you like blogging, listening to podcasts, writing, etc., etc.? How do I bring that in? A very important question, does your institution have Wi-Fi? It is a challenge that we're facing, and there are opportunities to resolve that. Vodacom, for instance, has got some great products that's available to learners. It needs to be administered by the school, but reach out. There's great opportunities. And then will the context enable you to create a blended learning environment? I need to understand the context. I need to understand my context, my student's context. To understand my student, do your students have mobile phones, laptops, or tablets? If not, is there a way in which we can reach out? Do the parents have access to those technology? Are there dedicated times in the evening or in the afternoon where they can use it and how they can use it? Are they able to access Wi-Fi on their devices? Wi-Fi is a broad term. Let's include our data, 4G, we're going to 5G, all these kind of things. Is it available in the environments they are? If not, how can we overcome it? And do we have technology skills? Do they have technology skills? Quite often, what we've seen is that our learners know more about technology, adapt quicker to technology than we as adults do. So the fear of them not being able to understand it is quite often unfounded. However, how do we direct them to make sure that they use it appropriately? And how can we support them? So where do we go from here? We really need to look at technology in schools. It is critically important to have it. How do we get there? All those kind of things. In order to get there, we first have to get our teachers to understand what it means and how to utilize it. We need community support, community in the form of our parents, of our management boards, the businesses around us, corporates. We need to look at computer labs for, for teachers' digital skills. How do we get those labs? Does the school have labs? Is it safe for them to use it? And then, very importantly, in terms of those labs, is this a little white palace that or a select few teachers have access to? Or do we make it open or make it available to all the teachers and learners in terms of it? What mobile schools do we have? And then obviously school leadership, incredibly important. As we go through this, all experience with the clubs that we've done, outreach to schools, the teachers learning was that if there is proper leadership from school and buy-in from the leadership of school, it flourishes. Where the leadership's not there, it really struggles. So we need that leadership from the management board, from the headmaster, from the heads of departments to make sure that we are able to go there. Some of the lessons that we've learned, really learner support. How do we make sure that learners have got access, they can read it, they're notified, that they have dedicated time and space to do this? Our community support and coordination. From our corporates, starting off, there are some wonderful initiatives from corporates in terms of academies that's put up, in terms of learnerships, making space for learners and students to engage, to understand what's happening. We had some great opportunities where we had gold students going into the office, going to university, understanding what it is, understanding what opportunities exist in order to go there, and to have the knowledge and the trust that a girl has got the same opportunities as a boy. Teachers' personal development, critically important here. We need to move on. We need to break that fear of the unknown, that fear of technology. How do we do that? And then, as I mentioned, leadership support, critically important. How do we do this? We need to co-design. We need to understand the need. We are bringing organizations, we bring in communities, schools, universities, all these kind of things. That's critically important there. So how do we deal with the misconceptions? A simple statement, but so true. Technology does not drive innovation. The teacher drives the innovation. And I want to repeat that. Technology does not drive innovation. We have the technology. We can utilize it. But if I have to tell you that we've spent the best part of 15 years talking about virtual working, the technology was already there, especially in first world countries. In South Africa, we didn't necessarily have the bandwidth, but it was doable. However, we never got there. All of a sudden, with the pandemic striking us, we were forced to go that route. Sometimes we need this push in going that extra step. But the innovation comes from the teacher. We can't continue teaching the same way we have when we're in a classroom. So how can we make this better? How can we use all these tools that's to our avail and make the learning experience better. Just some examples. We had tech clubs at the University of Western Cape, where we specifically look at project skills development. Things like problem solving, communication, creativity, collaboration. And it was built on a number of platforms. Web literacy. What does web literacy mean? How do I read the web? How do I write to the web? How do I participate in these? And in there, breaking it out and make sure that I can search and navigate and synthesize and evaluate, that I can protect and have an open practice, contribute and share. So all these things were brought in. We brought learners or students together at university where we discussed these items, where they discussed it and come up with very innovative ideas. These techs then spilled into our future tech clubs, where we involved learners, initially bring them onto campus, but that's challenging. If we look at the ability to travel, the cost associated, all those kind of things. We had some brilliant students that then went out to the schools. They went into the labs, they discussed things with the students. I've got a video link there. I'm not going to spend time on playing the video for you now, but please, once you have this document, it's published on YouTube, so it's approved, and we can visit it and view it. But just the experience, two brilliant female students that went out, engaged with the learners, and how they developed a love for learning and a curiosity in terms of what's available, what can I do, where do I go with this? As a result of that, we saw uptake in interest in mathematics and interest in engineering, engineering from a software side in terms of physical engineering, but that learning, that curiosity that keeps on growing. This is the video, so let me just skip that. Then from a teacher's project, we engaged about 600 teachers in a digital skills environment, teaching them how to infuse technology in education, teaching them on the various skills, the various tools that are available, how to utilize it, thinking about the instructional design, making sure that they understand what can be done, how do we use this. But also went much further, looking at policies related to education in schools, technologies to use in education. In order to get this done, as I mentioned previously, a number of very big questions. Who owns the lab and who has got access to the lab? If we don't open it up to all teachers, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. Why are we doing this? Really understand the purpose of what we are trying to achieve. It's not for a select few. This should be for the masses. This should be for enabling us to share what we're not able to share in person. But we need leadership support. We need the headmasters. We need the heads of departments to make sure this happens and that it's put open. From a community support perspective, providing us with resources, providing us with support, opening up opportunities, businesses to show the learners what's available, start using learnerships, start getting learners to utilize and provide some insights. And what we found with this is that the teachers are really starting to interact, they're sharing ideas, they're sharing knowledge, and really embedding this new way of working and where we go with this. How do we make learning interactive? It must be fun and it must be learning. And that's the best educational experience. I have to go look forward to my next lecture. I need to look forward to my next class. How do I interact? Based on that, we need to understand the learning styles and preferences of learners before we can start using technology. And then we start using technology in the correct way. So if we look at the various kinds of learning, visual learners who love diagrams and flowcharts and slides, our oral learners who prefer to listen to something. They look at YouTube videos, they listen to podcasts, they listen to ebooks, reading and writing. We always see those learners, those students that sit there and they make notes. The whole lecture, they make notes. They have the textbooks, they study guides. They've got yellow highlighters all over the place and stickies. But then we also have our kinesthetic learners, those who want to experiment and play and discover through their experimentation. How can we utilize chat forums, social media, and online learning in order to enable this? So if we look at all these kind of things, we've come up with a model. It's not a published model. There's a lot of research still to be done on But basically what it does, it looks at the various learning styles and how I use which presentation methods for each of those learning styles. It looks at whether it's a basic information up to very complex information. It looks at the interactivity that's required. So if I have an auditory or a visual learner, my interactivity may not be as high as if I have a kinesthetic learner. So how do I figure out which learners use which, or it's best at which learning styles? If we start using these learning styles, we can also use those same kind of learners and the personality types in terms of doing our assessments. And then just the presentation methods. If you look through it, certain learners works better in a classroom environment. Certain works very well in an online environment. So how do we have this overall mixed environment where we cater for all our learners? And having the technology and utilizing the technology to our best, we are able to do that. But understand your own context, understand the context within which we work. Most of all, understand the context for your learners. What are their learning styles? What works best for them? And in that way, we're really able to bring them closer and make education a lifelong joy and love. I've rushed through this presentation very quickly. So thank you so much for the time.